Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Thursday, July 10th, 2025. Now, we're going to keep it 2025. I think that's probably, I don't know if I even have control over that, but we'll opt to do it. And therefore, we presume that it is within our power. I feel like President Trump all of a sudden. I'm just going to say, I'm going to declare it 2025. It's already 2025, but that also means I get to declare the actual duration of a year and can manipulate time. Everyone now agrees that this is the case, and that's that. All right, well, all sorts of things he's claiming the power to do, as we discussed the other day, including nullify laws that are already on the books through a backhanded procedure, expanding the concept with the help of Pam Bondi, expanding the concept of prosecutorial discretion to the extreme. I needed like an echo effect. Charlie Savage revealed that one for us, so still waiting for another shoe to drop on that one. But let's see. Incrementalism brings us around to yet another claim of ridiculous and uncharted and unconstitutional powers. Just to drop this one out there. We'll discuss it perhaps a little bit later in depth. But another round of crazy tariff stuff. Of course, Wednesday was the end of the 90-day forbearance period that he gave himself last time to work out, of course, the 90 trade deals he said he was going to get in 90 days. We got zero, but there is a zero in 90, so that's batting 500 if you ask me, and that's pretty good when it comes to baseball. And this is baseball or governance. It's one of them, and I'm not certain which one it is, but it could be one of either. And again, that's batting 500. Every once in a while, 50% of the time, I'm right about this stuff. So okay, but he dropped another tariff, this time, I guess, non-retaliatory tariff, although he believes it's retaliatory, against Brazil. He is angry that Brazil is prosecuting former President Jair Bolsonaro for, staging a coup, because he doesn't really understand. I staged a coup. No one's prosecuting me. Oh, yeah, wait a minute. I used to complain daily that they were prosecuting me, and now I'm prosecuting the prosecutors, but whatever. Anyway, he feels this is unfair, and I guess he thinks he's doing a favor for a friend, Bolsonaro, and then ordering Brazil essentially to drop the prosecution against him or else, and in the meantime, the or else is 50% tariffs for Brazil, a huge trading partner. By the way, also responsible for I read somewhere, about a third of the world's coffee production. So that'll be no problem for America, as the rest of the world's coffee production is also under punitive tariffs. But 50% and drop the prosecution against Bolsonaro. And, of course, the economists have also happened to point out that his usual excuse for imposing a tariff, which he made in the letter, despite the fact that it's not true, is that the United States is running a trade deficit with whatever country, and they need to make up for it with retaliatory tariffs. They don't actually, change much in the way of the balance of trade, and they don't. It's not how you calculate these things, but whatever. We accept that he has this wrong-headed idea of how to address a trade deficit through tariffs, but there is no trade deficit with Brazil. We actually run a trade surplus with Brazil, but he claims there's a deficit anyway because that's already in the letter, and he didn't want to change that much of it. It's clear that also there's nobody in the White House saying no to him about anything, even up to and including proofreading a letter and saying, no, this is spelled wrong, or you don't capitalize that, or we can't say that, or that's wrong. So, things are getting worse there as the mental deterioration continues. Speaking of mental deterioration continuing, I have that. And so now is a good time to bring in Greg Dworkin, who does not, because he's got organized thoughts about what we should be talking about today. I did do my job and get a fanfare ready. This is one of the suggestions from Scott. This has historical usage. I don't know how many people are familiar with it, but it's very newsy. So ready, Greg? poster, too. And a nice wrap up to that one because it sounds like it's going to go on forever, but they really did their business and moved to it's Pathé News.
I can't figure out if it's MGM or Looney Tunes.
It's a little bit of both. Newsreel production, Pathé News, which I guess is historically Britain's leading news
Was this
source.
World War II era?
It started a little earlier, and it stretched into the modern era, I suppose, post-war. But the newsreel usage in movie theaters did not. But they kept producing them, So and I guess that they showed them at buggy whip conventions.
Yeah, but it's a post-silent movie organ playing.
Well, that ain't silent at all, right? Exactly.
Yeah,
it's definitely post-silence.
So
sure.
As far as your 50% being right and 50% being wrong,
I'm not sure about that.
That Trump's 50% is the new, we'll figure it out in 2 weeks.
Yes.
Because when he doesn't know what to do, it's 50%. And you mentioned 90 deals in 90 days. Technically speaking,
yes.
He actually has 2 out of 90, so it's 88 to 2. In theory, because in theory, Vietnam and the UK have deals, which is to say he said that there's a tentative deal on paper that we never show you, which is the framework for discussing a meeting where your people will contact my people, and we've agreed on all of that, so therefore we have a deal.
Yes. He also said that there was secret phone calls, and it didn't matter at one point. They asked him about, what about your 90 deals in 90 days? Oh, they're all done. I sent letters. To people.
I just can't,
So now we've seen one of the letters.
Right. And he thinks this because he thinks if you tell somebody what to do, it's done.
Right. He figures it's someone else's job to, execute and do this thing. He's the chief executive, but it's someone else's job to execute. And and so he said he had sent everybody a letter and then they didn't, we never heard back from them. And now that we've seen one of the letters, we can see why most people never responded. Well, first of all, they got them last week. And second of all, they're crazy. I mean, it's like getting you get a trade negotiation letter from Vermin Supreme. Do you answer?
Yeah,
no.
Exactly.
So anyway.
I got this letter from this guy. He says the rent's too damn high. What do I do?
The president of Brazil, I only know him as Lula, right? As how they refer to him. But he's got a very long name, and I don't remember all of it. And he did respond on social media by saying,
Lulu, wasn't she a Brit singer back in the day?
I'm sure. The response, of course, is, I don't know, this guy is crazy. So whatever, we don't have tariffs on you. And
that's a good lead-in to my first topic, since you're talking about crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk about Russia.
Oh, yeah. Oh, they're crazy.
They're crazy.
Sure.
So this is a Politico piece, the playbook for this morning, how Trump went sour on Putin.
That did happen.
It did. So this is just crazy, crazy stuff.
All right.
A week ago today, it says Trump had an hour-long phone call with Vladimir Putin, and after that, everything changed.
Do we have a readout? No.
Mm-mm.
Right, of course not.
And it's unclear whether or not there was an American translator. The end of the affair, the U.S. president, because in the past he's used the Russian translator rather than ours. The U.S. he has.
That's true.
He's crazy.
It's cost savings.
Yes, so I can believe everything they say. The U.S. president, who in January came into office claiming he could strike a peace deal with Putin on day one, just to remind people that he's a liar.
Okay.
Who in February berated Zelensky as a dictator who was gambling with World War III, and as recently as May, that would be 2 months ago, described Putin as a nice gentleman, has spent the past week making increasingly angry comments about the Russian president.
No.
And that's background for the Russian propagandist we'll play in a few minutes.
Okay.
And with every passing day, the new direction of travel becomes clearer. There's some meetings with Lavrov and Rubio, as if that matters. But late last night, Reuters revealed that U.S. weapons shipments to Ukraine have now restarted.
I see.
And again, another story I have in parallel is that Pete Hegseth, Secretary Vodka, had on his own, without telling the president, stopped shipments of weapons to Ukraine. And Trump just turned that spigot back on.
Well, he's an expert at that.
Two officials tell Reuters, Idris Ali and Phil Stewart, that American-made artillery shells and mobile rocket artillery missiles now being provided. It's unclear whether other parts of the shipment paused by Hegseth last week, such as the Patriot missiles, will also be headed to Kyiv, but it's looking promising for Ukraine. A buoyant Zelensky said he discussed weapons supplies with Trump's Ukraine envoy yesterday. And the Washington Post cited a senior White House official who says Trump has agreed to key Ukrainian requests for military aid based on a detailed list. And it's not just weapons. John Thune and Lindsey Graham say there's going to be a vote on Russian sanctions in the Senate.
Okay. All right. I guess I believe him.
So, yeah. Before we get too carried away with this New World Order, Politico says it's worth remembering that Trump has the propensity to flip back and forth on issues like we spoke to him last. You've covered this extensively on the show.
Yes.
And all the weapons so far are Joe Biden's weapons that he provided that Trump is simply letting through. New authorizations haven't happened yet.
Yeah, they're not into that normally.
Right. And then it goes on to say, just how badly Trump wants the Nobel Peace Prize. He figures he needs it for sending weapons to Ukraine.
Right.
And it turns out that every leader in the world knows the way to discuss things with him is to lie to him, pander to him. And I guess there was a African leader.
Yes.
There's a procession of African leaders, actually.
A large
queuing up to tell him why he should win the Nobel Peace Prize. And the president said, we could do this all day long. And he's obsessed with it. And he wanted Netanyahu to nominate him. So Netanyahu did, of course. But the weird thing, there's one weird trick about getting the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yes.
You have to convince the 5 Norwegian academics who assign it.
And they can't get into the country to do the research.
African leaders who can nominate him or Middle Eastern leaders who can nominate him.
Right?
That doesn't make any difference. It's up to the 5 Norwegian academics.
No, it isn't. I don't know.
And then what they do is they draw up a list in March, and then they spend the spring and summer deliberating in private. It's already July. Too late. He's not getting the Nobel Peace Prize.
But when do they announce it? I'm just curious.
They announce it in September.
Okay, so until September or October, he can tell everybody that he won.
Yeah.
And then they'll lie and say that he didn't, and he'll...
Yeah, the winner's announced in October, and then, he can go on True Social and tell them, that they're all losers.
I hate Norway.
Yeah, something like that.
Right, and we're excluding Norwegian tourists if they have funky pictures of J.D. Vance, so I don't know if that's getting back to the Nobel guys, but...
Right. In other words, everybody around the world knows that he's a jerk.
Yes.
And our own reporters are noticing that. This is Tom Nichols writing in The Atlantic. Pete Hegseth's patriotic duty is to resign.
Okay.
His incompetence is putting America's security at risk. And it's a nice story about, of course, this is true. He should have resigned at Signalgate. In fact, he never should have been nominated, let alone
should have gone to the bar
in the first
instead
place.
Of asking. Right.
But everything that's happened, no, he needs to go.
All true. Also, by the way, is it ranked choice voting for a Nobel Prize?
Is it ranked choice voting to get fired?
Well, all right. I'm ranking that number 1 for Pete Hegseth. Number 2 is let's have a drink.
Right.
Okay.
So Trump's aides, according to NPR, are now searching for somebody who can replace Hegseth. As night follows day, the White House has denied any such thing as happening. So, that's like having full confidence in your baseball manager.
Right, sure.
It's a kiss of death.
Yeah. Or being ISIS number 2. Or
if somebody in the administration says Tom Nichols is telling the media they're looking to move Hegseth out, it could be that Hegseth is secure but has enemies. It could be that Trump aides are worried about the corrosive effect that Hegseth's repeated blunders are having on the president's fortunes. And the third most obvious possibility is that he's going to be fired.
Okay. So everybody is
eventually
fired from Trump world. There's very few people that last that long.
Now, there's a Baghdad Bob kind of guy whose name is Vladimir Solovyev.
Okay.
He has a radio show called Full Contact, and Julia Davis consistently translates it for us so that we can see what the heck is going on. And what I'd like you to do, it's an 8-minute segment here on Solyov losing it. And he's, directly, he says what Putin thinks because Putin tells him what to say.
Oh, well, all right.
It's Russian disinformation.
Process. Sure.
Which is for internal use, that is to say Russian listeners. She translates it, and you'll get when you play the video, if you play the video.
I will.
You get the tone of his mental state. Of course, it's in Russian, so I'll give you the translation as we go along.
Oh, you're a Russian speaker
But he's not happy, which means Putin is not happy with Trump saying not nice things about him.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So you've directed me here to the middle of this 8-minute video.
Yeah. So we're going to be in the middle of. We're going to start at about 4 minutes, but I just have to tell your audience that at the 1 minute mark, which I don't think we really have time to do.
Oh, okay.
He's chuckling over the fact that Trump is obsessed with Jeffrey Epstein. And what the show does is it plays Trump's news conferences, and then he gives his interpretation of what's going on. Oh. So he gleefully points out that Trump is asking the media why they're obsessed with Jeffrey Epstein, which clearly means that Trump is obsessed with Jeffrey Epstein. But again, it's Russian disinformation, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Let's talk about this. This is more relevant.
All right. Let's see if I have the volume. We'll roll it at the 4-minute mark and see where we're going. And you'll be responsible for, I guess, reading the translation.
Yeah, that's how we'll do it,
as
if we're professionals.
All right. I'll try and keep the volume at a reasonable level then.
So he didn't believe me, but he's talking about speaking with Putin. But I said that if China invades Taiwan, we're going to bomb Beijing.
Okay.
And I have a simple question, he says. What percentage would Trump believe that we will erase the hell out of America? With what percentage would Trump believe that two Poseidon missiles coming from two different sides of the North American continent will cause the formation of a radioactive tsunami that will create a strait named after Comrade Stalin?
Okay.
That's what he's saying.
Wow.
How well will Comrade Trump understand and believe when he realizes our submarines of a certain class are armed with weapons that are powerful enough for any protective element that is yet to be built? Golden Dome, Diamond Dome, Shit Dome.
Oh, really?
Designed to protect America from a retaliatory strike. So he's saying we can just overwhelm them. Does he seriously think ballistic missiles are his freaking B-2s that are visible to us and will try to strike our territory? We'll just sit there and say, oh, look. No, we will freaking erase you off the face of the earth. And it just goes on and on and on. And it's another 4-minute rant about how he will destroy, Putin will destroy America.
But it's disinformation, so they won't destroy us. Is that right?
Yeah, well, it's hard to, but basically, this is not let's be friendly, Trump is great, which is often what the propaganda is here when Putin and Trump are going along. So we have all these different pieces of information. We have, what's in the news. We have the arms shipments being restored. We have Pete Hegseth on the outs. We have Russian propaganda not sucking up to Trump anymore. There's just a whole lot of stuff going on to think that the vibes have shifted.
Okay, I can grasp it. I don't know what
because no one thing
take from it, but
is believable. But you put them all together and say, he might have actually changed his mind about Putin.
Certainly could have happened, and he can change his mind about anything all the time.
He can change his mind back.
It's also very much in keeping with his pattern of sort of like trying his best to recreate life in the 80s or something. High tensions with Russia and threats of nuclear annihilation. Oh, okay, well, that's what we used to have. Acid rain, pollution.
Yeah, but it's also, let's cause a crisis and then I'll
Yeah.
fix it and then I'm up for the Nobel Peace Prize.
That's what this is about. Okay, eventually they'll get around to that. Will Putin nominate him, or I don't know. But I guess everybody, that's the way to get a meeting with him, right? I'll nominate you, or I'll announce that I'm going to nominate you at the meeting in front of the cameras. Yeah, I saw a bit of that parade of, well, I guess it was a round table of sorts. He met with a bunch of African heads of state. And then as they were introducing themselves and then telling a little story about why they were there to talk to the president of the United States, apparently he said, enough with that. Why don't we just go around the day and you just give me, let's say we'll keep it to your name and your country.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Let's treat you like my cabinet members.
Meanwhile, they all have little placards in front of them that say their name and their country, but he can't read them.
Just introduce yourself, your name, your country, and why I'm wonderful, and then we'll just go to the next person.
Yes. He also spent a few minutes praising the English skills of the president of Liberia and asking him how is it that he speaks such beautiful English.
English is the formal official language of Liberia, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And but he's amazed that could be the case.
Yeah. He was amazed that Prince Charles spoke English.
Yeah. Where did you learn to speak such beautiful? You don't capitalize right, but
you spell color wrong. But other than that,
very
pretty good at this.
Good.
Where'd you learn? Where'd you go to school?
He's really.
I went to public school. Oh, you went to public school. Public school in England isn't public school.
That's true too. They do that backwards as well.
Right.
All right.
So anyway, I just thought all of that was interesting. The next topic I want to cover
That's good.
Is the Texas Hill Country disaster.
Yes.
Still going on. I heard a very interesting interview this morning from the Kerr County emergency manager.
Yeah.
Who basically said, I don't have any answers for you.
Well, that's true.
But I just want to acknowledge these are completely legitimate questions.
Thank you.
We want to know as well. We'll get to the bottom of this. I promise you.
I'd like to know.
So you're going to keep asking me. I'm going to keep telling you I don't know.
Well, that's honest.
However, in the process of telling you I don't know, in the process of stonewalling you, I want to acknowledge that these are legitimate questions, which is actually not a bad way of doing it from a communications point of view.
Yeah, I think that's fair. If you really don't have the answers, if you're covering things up, that's one thing. But
even if you are putting it off for a little while, just saying, I acknowledge that these are legitimate questions. I just don't have answers. That's not bad.
Yeah, right. And a good reminder, in these situations, post-disaster of any kind, man-made or natural, very frequently the initial answers either turn out not to be true entirely or are only part of the picture, and the story and the narrative changes as information comes out.
Fog of war and all that stuff.
Sure.
And that's why it's important, and the experts will tell you, never minimize the tragedy when you don't really know. Well, this is not likely to be all that serious. You don't know that.
The news producers tell you the same thing.
Ever say that.
The news producers say, this is obviously the worst thing in history. We should immediately say that.
Yeah, don't say that either. Say you don't know. Preliminary looks okay, but there's still a lot more information to come. You have to say something like that.
Yeah, Texas is still there.
You can go back to the underwater oil leaks, where the president of BP say, well, it looks like it's minimal, and we don't expect much, much of a problem. Don't say that. You have no idea.
Yeah, we've seen this sort of thing from Krakatoa before. Don't worry about it.
Right. So this is something I sent you at the very end of yesterday after I was off the air. I had no idea if you covered it.
I also don't.
This is Lauren McGuffey speaking for Texas Public Radio. In his first presser after the deadly floods, the Kerr County judge said they don't have an emergency alert system. But we've learned that not only does the county have such a system, but first responders asked that it be triggered very early Friday morning. Some residents didn't get an alert until after 10 a.m., 6 hours after the flood. And now county officials won't answer our questions about why. And this is in parallel to something I heard on NPR this morning.
Okay.
Which is, again, they were interviewing the now retired Kerr County information technology guy. about how the alert system works.
Okay.
And he said it's actually easy and user-friendly.
Oh, well.
We have a list of everybody's telephone number, emails, and so on and so forth, and you just push a button with your recorded message, and it goes out to everybody. And I have to say, here in Newtown, Connecticut, after 12/14, after the shooting, we installed something like that so that everybody's phone in Newtown gets an alert from the first selectman, our mayor, when there's something like a flood or Amber Alert or whatever.
Right.
Everybody's phone lights up and we get this, and then the telephone at home rings, the landline, and we get the same message. So these systems exist. Small towns can afford them. They don't cost a fortune. And Kerr County has one, according to this guy.
Oh, well, that's interesting, too.
The thing is that he said he was concerned because, he's monitoring this because, like, once you retire, it's still a hobby to keep in touch with what's going on. And he was not getting alerts on his phone.
Okay.
About an event that he knew was going on. Which alarmed him. And he said, I was torn. I didn't do it. I thought about calling the emergency manager and saying, what's going on? Why aren't I getting an alert? But I was afraid, he said, if I called, there were so many people who were probably at risk. I might be blocking the phone call of somebody who was calling for emergency help and therefore save my life. And I was afraid to call. I didn't want to block that one call that might have been coming in. So I didn't call. But I don't understand why I didn't get a message.
Yeah. If all you have to do is press a button. And,
because it said I set it up. I know they have it. Why didn't they do it?
That's it was blinking 12 the whole time, and they didn't know whether it would really work.
Yeah, I pressed the button. Piece.
Yeah, or it's like our mute buttons. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. That is interesting. It stands to reason that they would have one and that they'd be cheap. All right, we'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I've pressed the button. Simple and easy. Even a child could operate the Kerr County Emergency Alert System. Where was this child? He was asleep in bed. It was the middle of the night. So I don't know. It's very interesting that they have this difficulty as between the top executive of the county, who they refer to as judge. I was a little confused about that, but all the articles have just been saying, I got no explanation for you. That's just what they call the top elected executive of some of these counties, judge.
Well, you wonder,
judge things
for
as
example,
well, or like is he Floyd the barber? He's also a barber. What happened here?
Yeah, that happens.
But he says, no, we don't have a button. And the guy who built the button says, you do have a button.
You do have a button. And this is Texas Public Radio. I'm going to read from the story that I referred to by Paul Flahive and Lauren McGuffey, Texas Newsroom. Kerr County has an emergency alert system, says the headline. Some residents didn't get text for hours. And yes, there's not great cell phone coverage in that area, but you'd think there's at least one landline where a grown-up can get messages.
Oh, it's down at
if
the
you
general
live
store.
in Flood Alley, you'd think that you would at least appoint somebody to like take phone calls.
Yes. Not in the
I mean,
middle
there's
of the
just so
night.
much that you do in advance that okay, when it's easy. Um, so Kerr County Sheriff Larry, he's not a judge, he's a sheriff. Kerr County Sheriff Larry Lathis said he
That
was
guy.
focused on search and rescue. And when asked Tuesday what time warnings were issued, he said, it's not that easy. You just push a button, okay? There's a lot more to that, and we told you several times. And the reporter then said, yes, but did it happen? And to which Lather responded, I cannot tell you at this time. That was an ABC reporter for local station who did that. They played that on ABC News.
Okay.
But the Texas newsroom has learned that not only does the county have a mass alert system, first responders asked that it be triggered early Friday morning. According to emergency radio transmissions, volunteer firefighters asked for what's called a code red alert to be sent as early as 4 a.m., 4:22 a.m. Dispatchers delayed, saying they needed special authorization. Some residents received flood warnings from Code Red within an hour. Others said they didn't receive their first alert until 10 a.m., well after the flooding happened.
Well, they were waiting for you to wake up.
Yeah. And the death toll is just rising and rising and rising. Local officials didn't respond to questions about exactly when and where Code Red was triggered, and that system has been in place in Kerr County since 2009. It's not foolproof. It doesn't reach everybody, but company representatives told the Texas newsroom the system can be used to alert people in real time. And the former information technology director for Kerr County, the one I was referring to, it's even here, told the Texas newsroom he helped install it. He provided hours of radio communication. He recorded in the early hours of the flood. His recordings show calls to emergency dispatchers about rising floodwaters coming in around 3 a.m. So the dispatcher said on the recordings she needed authorizations from a supervisor to issue an alert.
I'll have to talk to my
wake your supervisor.
Yeah. Well, I did. I pressed the button. He didn't wake up.
Right. So,
this happened
it's
at
not
420.
Perfect. It
so
doesn't get everybody. However, still a lot of questions to be answered.
And none of them will bring anybody back. That's true. But the learning experience is supposed to be here. This is Flood Alley. Let's do the next flood better. Let's press the button.
The New York Times published an article.
They'll be pressing it for everything, though. Yeah.
Said the New York Times just published an article stating that the National Weather Service person responsible for communicating weather alerts took a Doge unplanned early retirement and was not replaced. They had somebody whose specific job, very experienced guy, whose specific job was to make sure that if you issue an alert, the alert gets to where people need to go. In other words, you follow up.
Oh, follow up.
And that was his job, and that's the job that was eliminated. So it's not a question of
you don't need it.
Does the National Weather Service have the ability to forecast? You also have to make sure that alerts are issued and that the alerts get to the people who need to hear the alert. They had somebody who did this, whose job was eliminated, therefore he wasn't around during the time that this happened.
Yeah. If there was any analysis at all, I'm sure that, Big Balls sat there and looked at that and said, so you got one guy calls everybody and the other guy checks to see if the calls went out. That's redundant. Waste, fraud, abuse. Chop that one. Except it didn't get to that level. They just said 50% reduction across the board, randomly you, and you, or anybody who wants to retire rather than have us throw darts at your pictures, go ahead. And, you don't know who's going to accept that. They're having that problem everywhere in every department. So, okay. They probably did think that was redundant and stupid to have somebody check on these things, but
right. Meanwhile, not only
you know why they do it.
Is MAGA World obsessed with Jeffrey Epstein for their own reasons and purposes, including getting Matthew Gaetz back in and Pam Bondi out.
Oh my God!
They're also obsessed with weather manipulation. So this one, was from early this morning from Dr. Robert Rohde, Rohde, who is a weather specialist, chief scientist at Berkeley Earth, physics PhD, et cetera, et cetera. Some people are suddenly very opposed to cloud seeding and all forms of weather modification. He's referring to that rant from Marjorie Taylor Greene we covered yesterday.
Okay, yeah.
And he says, boy, are these people going to be upset when they realize fossil fuel burning has been changing the composition of the atmosphere.
Yeah. I mean, isn't that something? No, you can't have man-made changes to the weather. It's just a natural cycle.
Yeah, it's impossible.
Except for the ones
it's
you're
ridiculous.
doing with the Jewish space
Man-made
lasers.
stuff has nothing to do with the weather. By the way, they also manipulate the weather and Jewish lasers.
Yeah,
but let's keep both of these thoughts
Obama weather
in our head
machine.
at the same time, because otherwise, if I try to make sense of it, I will, I will reboot.
Yep. Marjorie Taylor Greene wants, investigations launched into the weather manipulation machines that are totally non-Jewish, by the way. They do the space lasers, yes. You can pop popcorn in somebody's house from space, but weather, that's just crazy talk. All right. Well, yeah, there's a lot of that going on. I saw there was a story from, I'm not even sure where, but I think we can dig it up. Surveillance video of somebody, I think it might have been in Texas, climbing the fence somewhere of a local TV station to sabotage their weather forecasting radar, because that too is causing it causes COVID, and it's controlling the weather, and it's
it's like the
whatever
the power lines,
right,
causing cancer because you have your cell phone too close to your ear or something.
Right. Well, so he climbed over the fence, caught on video. I don't know if they've rounded this guy up yet, or he's like the guy who planted bombs at the RNC and DNC headquarters on January 6th. They just can't find this one.
Instead of being caught on video, I wish you were caught on the fence. That would have been better.
And that may have happened as well. They're just going to look for it. We're looking for a guy who meets this description and has a hole in his pants.
For those of you who are interested in following this story, Texas Public Radio, TPR,
yes,
and which is always free, and Texas
Toilet Paper
Monthly
Radio
has taken the paywall down for any story involving flooding.
Okay.
So Texas Monthly. This is one from
I like
Texas
that model.
Monthly. Flooding in the Hill Country is a centuries-old story after last week's disaster, reflecting on the region's past, could help prepare us for what's to come. It's really helpful to know that, for example, that area is in fact called Flood Alley, that everybody who lives and works there is in fact aware of that. Mm-hmm. And there is, in fact, a reason why it's called that. It's all relevant information.
I don't know why Republicans don't care a great deal about it. It's a pretty Republican area, and it's weird that they're abandoning it. I'm also surprised that Speaker Johnson, I would have thought that the Noah's Ark guy would have been more interested in catastrophic flooding.
You'd think. So this is a catalog of various years and various problems. But they just do note, the flood was the latest in a long line of disasters that have devastated the region every few years over the last century, collectively killing around 600 people and destroying billions of dollars in property. As emotionally difficult as it can be to recall such tragedies, it's worth reflecting on some of the worst floods over the last 100 years as we ponder how to confront the others that are sure to come. The one thing that's obvious is that if you're going to build a camp in that area to get access to the river, because everybody seems to love that, move it up about 30 feet.
Well, it's an old camp.
Not 30 feet from the river, 30 feet up.
Yeah.
Go up a hill.
In elevation, yes.
Yeah.
It might be 100 feet from the river.
At the Mystic Camp, the higher elevated cabins, everybody survived. The low-lying cabin that the little kids got next to the river, not so much.
Mug. That's not great. And I'm sure, the planning was not for the flood. The little kids, they want to be able to get to the waterfront, and we don't like the long walk back up the hill. It made some sense. The camp's very old. It's been there a long time, so
personally,
they probably thought.
I don't know. If I'm the camp director, I would want to keep the little kids away from the river, but,
yeah,
I'm a parent.
Right. I don't know. I guess they figure the older kids
they're
can
not 3-year-olds, they're 8-year-olds, 6-year-olds,
the hill. Yeah. Your typical sleepaway camp situation. And, again, they're like, hey, this camp's been here 100 years, hasn't been washed away by a flood yet. Okay. And completely. It was probably built before, it's grandfathered into the old code where you got to be. And if they ever had a code in that county, don't build immediately next to the river that floods all the time. Build higher, except if you've built this in 1927. Nothing we can do about it. Yeah.
In 1987, in the late hours of July 16th, storms began moving into central Texas. By early the next morning, the Guadalupe River had risen 29 feet, causing massive floods in Ingram, Kerrville, and Comfort. Comfort is the one that has the sirens now. This is why.
Wow.
Here's an interesting human interest story.
Yes.
10 teenagers died as the staff members of one of the camps, Pot of Gold Ranch, tried to evacuate by bus and van, and the vehicles got swept away. So evacuating isn't always simple either, as officials had pointed out. That's true. But among the survivors was one young man who was pulled to safety by a deer. Not
by
John
a deer.
Like a real deer.
Oh. How?
I don't know. These things happen. I guess the deer wanted to get away, and he just, put his arms around the deer's neck and just held on.
Maybe. Then he ate the deer.
13 people died in December 1991 when a downpour lingered there, and then they named the rivers. 1997, 1998, Texas Hill Country hit by a similar, if less deadly event. I mean, these things are predictable. It's like every 10 years. So that's why they call it Flood Alley. And yes, you need to do something about it and think about your planning.
Okay. Have the kids sleep in rubber rafts.
Something like that. Of course, debris and the rapid, it's like going down rapids. So that alone won't protect you. Even if the cabin could float, you could still hit a bridge. So,
right. Yeah.
How do we know that? Because houses are hitting bridges.
Happens. Right. Ugh. Well, I don't know. I mean, what can I tell you? I hope they take some lessons from it. It's clear that in bits and pieces and in fits and starts and in various locations in Flood Alley, they have taken lessons from this thing. Like, comfort. Let's build a siren system and we'll use it.
Or let's install a emergency warning system.
Yeah.
We won't use it, but
that was lesson 2. We didn't get that far in the book. Step 1, build emergency alert system. Step 2, hold on. I'll get to this later.
Make
the book
it so that you could use it in the middle of the night in an emergency.
Yeah. Push button. Well, push it where? I didn't get to that part. All right.
In other words, empower the people to do the alert and let the supervisor yell at you later.
Yeah, I guess that's true too, right? Yeah, imagine that one. I sent out the alert and I guess I sent out the alert prematurely and it wasn't necessary and I woke a bunch of people up. You're fired. All right, well.
Fine. Better that than people die.
I guess so. Unless you're that person getting fired, you feel differently about it, surely. But okay. I mean, if calls are coming in, hey, from people all in the county all across the area saying water's up 30 feet, come rescue me, then you probably could say, my supervisor would probably be okay with this.
So now for something completely different, as Monty Python might say.
Yes.
I'm going to give you one graph here.
I'm ready to receive
chart/graph here from
here yet.
Echelon Insights, which I thought was interesting about the general American electorate.
It's colorful.
It's colorful. That's really the important thing to take away from this. It has different colors. If you're colorblind, I'm just telling you it's colorful.
That is some DEI crap.
Where do most American voters fall in the political compass? And it divides the electorate into quadrants.
That should be enough.
Economic and social. So let's say you're socially liberal and economically liberal.
Here's some money.
You want to spend money on stuff like emergency management. That would make you economically liberal.
Right.
As opposed to economically conservative. Now we can't afford it because Texas is huge and you know how many people we'd have to cover.
Right.
And that's why we don't have good school systems, because Texas is a young state, as one reporter told me, and people don't want to spend the money to improve the schools because it would cost us a fortune. So if you're economically conservative, that's one thing. If you're economically liberal, that's something else. Social conservative and social liberal probably don't need to be explained to this audience. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, you are in the 4 quadrants of socially liberal, economically liberal.
All right.
That is 43% of the population.
Oh.
It's the largest of the 4 quadrants, but not a majority.
All right.
If if you want a majority, you got to pick off voters from one of the other quadrants.
All right.
If you are in the socially
the
conservative, economically conservative quadrant, you would be called a conservative.
You are here in this, yes.
That's 31% of the population.
So
the liberals, remember, this is a center-right country, except for the fact that it's really a center-left country.
Good point there. That's true, and it's a
but not a majority.
So
you got to pick off the other two quadrants, and this is where it gets interesting.
Okay.
If you are socially liberal and economically conservative, hint, hint, Rand Paul.
Yes.
You're a libertarian.
Are you? Okay.
5% of the population.
All right. So economically conservative and socially liberal. Huh.
Right?
He's not even socially
government
liberal,
should stay out of my bedroom, but by the way, I ain't spending money for nothing. No taxes.
Yeah. Right. Or warning sirens.
There aren't that many people in that quadrant. So if you're a liberal, for example, at 43%, and you want to pick off one of the other quadrants, going after the libertarians, even if you got each and every one, which you would never do, still doesn't get you to 50.
Yeah, so forget them.
Exactly right. Do not pay attention to them whatsoever.
Okay.
If you are, so this would be socially conservative, but economically liberal. Like, don't touch my Medicaid.
Okay.
Get rid of the immigrants, but don't touch my Medicaid.
Yeah. Don't touch me.
You're a populist.
Am I? Or would I be?
That's 22% of the population.
Oh, there's a number.
I don't like them, but it's a way bigger quadrant than the libertarians. So if I'm a 43% of the population liberal, and I'm going to go try to get some votes from people, I'm going to get them from the populists. Conservatives are a waste of time. They'll never vote for me.
Right.
Even if the libertarians vote for me, there aren't enough of them. So if I'm going to go after votes, I'm going after the populists.
All right.
I'm going to try to convince them
populists.
that, hey, you're losing your Medicaid. You should vote with us. We both agree that it should be preserved. I don't like your social views, but I'll make peace with you if you vote my way.
Yeah. Should we lie to them?
Well, liberals are going to be unhappy about this, but I'm just saying this is the political reality.
Well, yeah, and the conservatives appear to have figured that out. It's just that their approach to it is, well, if we want that 22%, we could lie to them and say, we're going to do your things, and we're not going to do the things you don't like, but then do them.
And so now we're going to talk about my real interest for today is the New York City mayoral election, which I just think is fascinating at so many levels.
Well,
so think about Zohran Mamdani and who he has to convince to vote for him and where he's going to get his votes from.
All right.
Based on our quadrant discussion.
Populists,
just keep it at the back of your mind.
All right.
So he's going after Trump voters.
Well, they're conservatives.
People who voted for Trump in 2024 but might vote for him. Why is he doing that? I just told you why he's doing that.
Okay. Right. Because he needs more than 43%.
Yeah, no, it's bigger in New York, but this is
that's
across
true
the country, 43%. Nonetheless, the strategy is the strategy. So this is from Politico this morning. I told you yesterday there was going to be a new poll out. Wasn't out in time for our discussion yesterday. Now it's out. Democratic nominee Zohran Mamdani holds a 10-point lead over Andrew Cuomo in New York City's general election for mayor, while incumbent mayor Eric Adams is in fourth. He trails Republican nominee, also random perennial candidate Curtis Sleeswa, according to a new poll.
Right. They got some great Curtises over there on that side.
They do. Mamdani gets support from 35%, Cuomo 25%, Sleeswa 14%, Adams 11%, and independent attorney Jim Walden at 1%. Nobody talks about Jim Walden. That's why.
Wow. So they have 3 independent candidates.
Yes.
Huh. All right.
A Republican nobody, and then Mamdani. So, he's going to win.
All right,
13% of respondents said they weren't sure, while 1% picked another candidate.
There's not enough.
Right.
We also want
Now, there was a candidate who lost, Scott Stringer, in the Democratic primary.
Sure.
Slingshot Strategies is his polling firm. So it's a Democratic polling firm, but not Zohran Mamdani's polling firm.
Okay. Who did this one? All right, yeah.
It comes as Cuomo weighs whether to mount a serious campaign in his independent fight and deliver line. Remember, in New York, you can be on two lines. He was angling to be both on the Democratic line and the fight and deliver line. So he lost the Democratic nomination, but he's still on the fight and deliver line. That's how he can run. And the former governor and the current mayor publicly bicker and call on one another to drop out. I sent you this beautiful headline picture. Where's it from? Daily News?
Yes.
And it's a picture of Cuomo and Adams staring at each other like in a prize fight. And the headline is, "No, you drop out."
Sure, why not?
Perfect. The tabloids just are really good at this in New York, so got to pay attention to them.
Yeah. And
Adams in particular is in a bad spot. I've had people on Daily Kos when I write about this say, yeah, but I'm just afraid that Eric Adams will sneak in some. Eric Adams is in a particular bad spot, says Politico. His net approval rating is minus 34, with 28% of respondents expressing a favorable view, 62% unfavorable. By comparison, Mamdani's +4, Cuomo's -2. Adams trails Mamdani among every single subset of voters except one, Republicans. Sliwa leads among Republicans overall, 43 to Adams 26. Mamdani gets 7 among Republicans, and Cuomo gets 16.
Oh.
Adams, who is black, trails both Mamdani and Cuomo among black voters.
Yeah.
Right? Mamdani 35, Cuomo 32, Adams at 14, and Sliwa at 3. And let me just explain, and this comes not from me, but from the people who know this area much, much better than I do. Yeah, I just follow it out of interest and have family there and grew up there, but there are people who know it much better than I do. The black politicians and the black voters who follow them are concerned that upscale, yuppie type white voters supporting Mamdani might push their voters, the black voters, out of housing because as gentrification happens, the price of rentals goes up.
All right.
I didn't talk about the price of ownership, but that too.
Yeah.
But the price of rentals goes up to the point where if and when emboldened Mamdani voters, even further to the left of Mamdani, start to make noise about challenging people like Hakeem Jeffries in a primary or other Democratic stalwarts in a primary, Hakeem Jeffries' camp calls these people team gentrification.
I see. I don't know how that'll resonate.
As a slander, as a slur, whether it's true or not, but that's because of the dynamic I'm talking about. So when you see it, you'll recognize why they're using that term. That's a weird term.
I did think so.
That's why.
I see. That helps not at all. I mean, I understand why they're doing it. I don't see where they're going to go with that.
No,
team gentrification. I could barely get that on a bumper sticker.
Yeah, it's all inside baseball here, but that's the dynamic.
Okay.
Now, the background here is Andrew Cuomo was ahead in multiple polls by double digits in all of these groups. And Mamdani wound up winning the Democratic primary 56 to 44.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. And other polls conducted after the June 3rd primary have found similar results for the general election. Meanwhile, Eric Adams, the guy who everybody hates, who's in 4th place, asked Bill Ackman, the loudmouth Trump hedge fund supporter.
Yeah. Harvard
and Dan Loeb, another loudmouth Trump supporter hedge fund guy.
Okay.
For help to vet his campaign manager before hiring him. Because Adams wants their money for the campaign.
Yeah.
Because Ackman and Loeb, the hedge funds titans, as the New York Times calls them, are so anti-Mamdani, they're everything to stop him kind of guys. So who do they wind up vetting?
Oh,
they vet
that's a good question.
who actually got the job is now the campaign manager for the
Shocking.
Disgraced and disliked Adams, a guy named Eugene N-O-H.
No.
The candidate interviewed separately by Ackman and Loeb was announced on Tuesday as Mr. Adams' new campaign manager.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, no.
Now, let me tell you about this guy.
All right.
He is known to be a racially insensitive loudmouth.
No.
Mayor Adams tapping new campaign manager with history of inflammatory rhetoric.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, Ackman and Loeb had no problem with that because they themselves had done similar things, especially Loeb.
Yeah.
And what's really super interesting,
yes,
is that this is a James Carville, Mary Madeline situation.
Oh?
No, who's the new guy?
No!
Is Eric Adams. His wife, who is on the city council, is an anti-Adams, very vocal supporter of Mamdani.
Oh. Okay.
And she was asked about that. And she said, my husband is really super talented. He's really good. He'll help any campaign that he works on. The problem is when you don't have any material to work on, it's not going to work.
Yeah, that's rough. What's the guy's first name?
Eugene.
No.
N-O-H. Eugene.
Okay. No. All right.
Longtime New York political consultant.
Eugene,
history of inflammatory
don't
rhetoric. Is the husband of progressive and anti-Adams Queens Councilwoman Julie Wan.
I see. All right.
He's expected to be formally announced for the new position, and he was.
Okay.
So that's about. It's just fascinating. New York politics.
Yeah, and I wondered about that. The N-O-H surname suggested maybe Asian American, but yet, somehow racially insensitive to other races besides the Asian races, I guess. Or maybe those two.
I'm just saying.
Okay.
He's got a history.
Look, you're not exempt from it because you're a minority. It sometimes makes it worse.
Right. So Adams, who is extremely unpopular, is going to pick as his campaign manager somebody known for a history of inflammatory rhetoric. By the way, he vetted it with some really obnoxious people who would normally be supporting Republicans and or Cuomo. Yeah. But Cuomo is so bad and so embarrassed. Cuomo's not getting that money. Adams is, and yet Adams is in the worst possible situation to take advantage of it. And that's why Mamdani is going to be the next mayor.
Okay, let's get to it already. I know it's going to take us till November, I guess.
Yeah, 4 months.
All right. Welcome back, everyone, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. That's 4 good months of making fun of the fact that Adams's campaign manager is named No. I don't know whether he's a doctor or not. Got his PhD. He's Dr. No. We can say his name is No. And speculating on, I have no reason to believe this is the case. What if I was thinking his middle initial is I don't know what his middle name is. His middle initial is C. So he's Eugene C. No. We can't make up our mind what this guy is saying. The Daily News article that Greg had sent on this one has a photo of the family here with their, one of, I don't know how many kids they have, but they've got one in their arms at the moment that this picture is taken. From when, I don't know. Oh, I do know. October 22nd, 2022. How do you like that? This is because they are at the Sunnyside Post Mile Run. I don't know. That's not why it's October 22nd, 2022, but that was the date of it. So they have that. Here is Eugene No and Julie Wan, who is the New York City Council member, and their young child, whose name is left out of the caption, probably, want to keep it private, and his face is covered, and so, it's all appropriate and everything, but it is October 22nd, so I guess it's a Halloween event. And they are dressed in like Mario Brothers costumes. The kid is Mario and just wearing a hat. And but Eugene is in full body Luigi gear, minus any mustaches. Luigi has a mustache, doesn't he? And Julie is, I'm not familiar enough with the Nintendo game to be able to tell you accurately the name of there's a princess-like type character. She's wearing a little crown. So the whole family is having a good time, just being normies at the fun run in Halloween, and yet we have this problem happening. Okay, so we got 4 months to wait for the answer for this stupid election, and 4 months to hear about Eugene No telling us yes to Adams, and Julie saying no. Would I rather have Zohran Mamdani? Yeah. All right, very easy to figure that one out. Okay, it's going to be interesting. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if we had an Asian American James Carville, Mary Madeline type couple. But it also would not be the best thing I could think of happening. So, all right. Moving along, I wanted to, well, let's see. First of all, I have to test out my makeshift read it later system. Is, since I do so much of the social media reading on my phone, I tend to pick the articles from there and try to sort them and keep them there. And so now I have, thanks to Rosalind McGregor's picture tutorial directing me to where to find the articles that I press the read it later button on my phone. It uses Safari on my phone as the default there, so it parks it there, even though most of the searching I do is on DuckDuckGo. And the phone always is constantly trying to get me to choose between using Google, Chrome, and Safari. But anyway, gosh, all right, so there's an awful lot here, but I got to try and find so I've bookmarked a couple of things here. This story will serve as a follow-up to yesterday's discussion of the launch of essentially fake FBI. They're real, but the rationale behind them is fake, I guess, and all of the normal process that goes into deciding whether or not to launch an FBI investigation is all basically fake. But and so now FBI investigations of former FBI Director James Comey and former CIA Director John Brennan for the crime of having investigated Donald Trump at some point. So the follow-up there, how serious is it getting, is addressed by the New York Times yesterday, I guess. Where's the date line on this thing? July 9th. And today's July 10th. And I think I told you that at the beginning of the show. But I'm not even positive. I don't remember that anymore. New York Times, Michael Schmidt, as usual, and Eileen Sullivan on this piece from yesterday. Comey tracked by Secret Service after post critical of Trump. Long story short on that one is, you remember when Comey was on vacation. He was on vacation in the Outer Banks of North Carolina, I believe. That's not a necessary part of the story, except insofar as it becomes necessary to explain why he had access to so many seashells. And that's a very, exactly, sound effects guy who isn't me. That's exactly the sort of thing you would want. Where did he get all these nefarious seashells? He, of course, was at the beach, and that's the answer of how he got the seashells. The real question, though, what did he do with those seashells? And as you may recall, I would say spelled out, but it was numbers here. So you tell me. He wrote out with seashells in the sand, I'm telling you, 8647. You remember that one? 86, like 86 that guy or whatever. And Don Jr., immediately knowing exactly what he was doing, said, he's making an assassination threat against my daddy. And you know how that can be in American politics, right? We went to war in Iraq because that guy tried to kill my dad. And that looks like statesman-like now compared to what we've got at this point. So Don Jr., at somebody's prompting, I'm sure, said that was an assassination threat. It was not. People have used that term all the time. In fact, the Trumpers used it all the time during the Biden administration and said 8646 all the time. They sold T-shirts to that effect. The article mentions that Amazon.com still carries 8646 shirts and 8647 shirts. Anyway, they trumped up this complaint, the Trumps did, that this was an assassination threat. And so therefore, here's what happened. Comey got tracked by the Secret Service after the former FBI director, which also amazingly that they can't just say, we know who this guy is. He's not a threat to the president. We just need to stop fooling around here. Instead, they too, the Secret Service is in the business of making the idiot Trump child happy. We got to do what he wants us to do, even if it's stupid and a waste of time and takes us away from protecting him, which I'm not opposed to, but okay. The former FBI director put a picture on Instagram, it's Instagram's fault, see, of seashells arranged to say 8647, which he should have said just washed up that way. It's God, and you need to do something about that. Go follow Poseidon. He did it. But he arranged seashells to say 8647. Law enforcement tailed his car and tracked his cell phone. Steps usually reserved for serious threats. Now, there's two ways of reading that with the emphasis on that. Steps usually reserved for serious threats, like people who really will try to possibly kill the president. Or steps usually reserved for serious threats, like this is not even serious. What are we doing here? All right. The Secret Service had former FBI Director James B. Comey, followed by law enforcement authorities in unmarked cars and street clothes, and tracked the location of his cell phone the day after he posted an image on social media in May that President Trump's allies said, his son anyway, said amounted to a threat to assassinate the president, according to 3 government officials. Mr. Comey and his wife, Patrice, were tailed by the authorities as they drove from the North Carolina coast, where they had been vacationing, through Virginia to their home in the Washington area, the officials said, describing the details of the surveillance on condition of anonymity because they did not want to be identified as discussing a federal investigation. At the same time, the Secret Service was receiving information showing the location of Mr. Comey's phone, while federal authorities were stationed at his home waiting for him to return, the officials said. Why were they waiting for him to return? That becomes clear later. The intense surveillance occurred a day after Mr. Comey, long perceived by Mr. Trump as an enemy, had posted a photo on social media of seashells that he said he had found while walking on the beach. The shells were arranged in the formation 8647, combining a slang term meaning to dismiss or remove with the numerical designation of Mr. Trump's second presidency. Thank you, New York Times. Trump critics have often displayed the phrase on signs and clothing at protests. T-shirts saying both 8647, referring to Trump, and 8646, referring to former President Joseph R. Biden Jr., are available for sale on Amazon. And it's Amazon Prime Days, everybody. They're not even paying me to say this. Can you get a deal on any of these shirts? Who cares? They're dumb shirts. You don't want either one of them. Shortly after the image was posted, Donald Trump Jr. wrote on social media that Mr. Comey was, quote, casually calling for my dad to be murdered, which is, to be fair, a major pastime in this country. The accusation created a firestorm online as Mr. Trump's supporters accused Mr. Comey of plotting to assassinate the president. What a plot. When Mr. Comey learned of the uproar, he deleted the post, said he did not know that it had a violent connotation, and that he opposed violence of any kind. To me, it has a restaurant connotation. 86, the calamari, which means take it off of the specials board or the menu or whatever because it's not available anymore. We've run out of calamari. Not let's go kill the guy who makes calamari. It's just we don't have any of that anymore. And maybe that's not such a bad thing. Anyway, that's where Comey was coming from. The Secret Service interviewed him by phone that evening. And Mr. Comey said he had no intent to cause the president harm. That should, I guess, have been the end of it. It really should have been the end of it when they said, we got this complaint that 8647 is an assassination threat. What? No, it isn't. That's the end of it. But if you progress, well, all right, do we know who posted it? Yeah, Jim Comey. Oh, well, that's the end of it there. We don't need to investigate the former FBI director. Guy's got a security clearance and everything. He's fine. All right. The president now is going to demand that we do something. All right, call him. Ask him if he intends to. Hello, this is the FBI. You remember you used to work here? Yes. What can I do for you? Do you intend to assassinate the president of the United States or solicit someone else to do it? No. All right. Investigation over. Now, typically, that would have been the extent of an investigation into someone like Mr. Comey, anyway, who has no violent history and previously led the federal government's foremost law enforcement agency, according to former Secret Service officials, because there was more than enough to establish that Mr. Comey was not an imminent threat. Instead, the Secret Service responded by deploying physical and digital surveillance that the former officials said would typically be used, yes, sometimes, but they would be used for someone who was an active threat, say, to a person under agency protection. And it's unclear whether Mr. Comey's car was tailed by Secret Service personnel, other federal agents, or local law enforcement officials in the areas of North Carolina and Virginia that the Comeys drove through. Okay. To justify following Mr. Comey, the Secret Service cited exigent circumstances, according to two of the government officials, using a term, not everyone is familiar with exigent circumstances, using a term that in law enforcement means a pressing need to take immediate action. It is unclear what those exigent circumstances were. At the time, Mr. Trump was traveling in the Middle East. So, okay, we think that we got to cover all our bases here. What if? And wilder things have happened. Donald Trump got elected president the second time. What if the former FBI director is thinking of soliciting someone else to do, or in fact doing it himself, assassinating President Trump? What should we do about that? What are the exigent circumstances? We got to figure out what this meant and whether there's a serious threat. And in fact, an immediate threat. Well, where is Jim Comey now? North Carolina. And where is the president? Is he in Washington, D.C., just 2 states away? No, he's in the Middle East. Well, does Comey have contacts with assassins in the Middle East? That I'm not sure. But let's check on Jim Comey to see whether he is using a satellite phone to communicate with ISIS operatives in the Middle East to alert them to, like they don't know, that Trump is in the Middle East. Anyway, the point is there would be no immediate threat there can't be any immediate threat to the person of the president. He's not anywhere near Jim Comey, even if you think Jim Comey is going to try to assassinate the president. The question is, has he hired soldiers of fortune to do it in another state? And will following his car tell us anything about that? No, probably not. The Secret Service has been under intense scrutiny over the past year, though, and you guys have to keep this in mind. You better check this out, because remember when that guy shot Trump and was sitting on a rooftop with a AR-15 and a scope pointing it at Trump for like a couple of hours and it didn't do anything? Sort of the Uvalde of the Secret Service, or the Kerr County Emergency Services of the Trump assassination. Yes. Okay, well, shouldn't we do a better job on other things now? Sure, you should. The Secret Service has been under intense scrutiny over the past year because of 2 attempts to assassinate Mr. Trump, and that's not on them necessarily, except for the one where they didn't do anything. In one of those, during a campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, he was shot by a gunman. It was the first assassination attempt against a former or sitting president since 1981. I guess in which somebody actually fired a bullet at them, I suppose, would be a clearer way of saying. Certainly there were people plotting to kill former presidents that they checked out. Anyway, even so, Barbara McQuaid, former U.S. attorney, said the decision to follow Mr. Comey was huge overkill. The only rational basis for this action I can think of is that someone said to themselves, "We've got him. We are going to punish him for this mistake." Ms. McQuaid said. almost seems like someone was exploiting the opportunity to exact retribution against one of President Trump's enemies. That's most likely. Of all the explanations, I think she's right. The Secret Service initially declined to comment, but shared a statement after the publication of this story. That comment being, the Secret Service will vigorously investigate any individual, regardless of position or status, that may pose or be perceived as a threat to any of our protectees, said Anthony Guglielmi, a spokesman for the service. To preserve operational integrity, we are not able to comment on specific protective intelligence matters. Mr. Comey has not been charged with a crime, and the status of the inquiry into his actions is unclear. The Justice Department did not respond to a question about whether the investigation is ongoing, though we also read the other day that they were going to launch an investigation into him anyway, having little or nothing to do with this threat. Is there another investigation of this threat, or they closed the book on this threat? Maybe, maybe not, but we're going to investigate him anyway. A White House official who spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss the investigation said that the Secret Service had launched the inquiry on its own and it had not been requested by the White House. Totally plausible. That's a dramatic pause for saying not really. A representative for Mr. Comey declined to comment. At the time Mr. Comey took down the post, there was a chorus of calls by Mr. Trump and his allies to have Mr. Comey investigated. They were going to do that anyway, as you found out. That night, the Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security, that's an interesting way of putting it, as opposed to the Secretary of Homeland Security, which is her job, that's her title, Kristi Noem, of course, said Mr. Comey had, quote, just called for the assassination of @POTUS Trump, of course, doing this all by social media, as most responsible government servants will. DHS and Secret Service is investigating this threat and will respond appropriately, she said. And then, lo and behold, they responded inappropriately. That is weird. Later that night, Mr. Trump's Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, went on Fox News and said, quote, James Comey, in my view, should be held accountable and put behind bars for this, unquote. By which she meant, of course, he should be a celebrity guest bartender. The following day, Mr. Trump said on Fox News that Mr. Comey, quote, knew exactly what that meant. And that a child knows what that meant. And a child does not. The child doesn't know what it means in restaurant lingo. Certainly has no idea what it means in this made-up idea that it was somehow an assassination threat. That's crazy. If you're the FBI director and you don't know what that meant assassination, Mr. Trump said. He couldn't even complete that thought. If you're the FBI director and you don't know what that meant, you're terrible. You should never have been how could anyone not know? But here's what it means, because no one knows what it means. Anyway, although the Secret Service had interviewed Mr. Comey on the phone soon after the uproar began, the agency insisted on interviewing him again the following day, this time in person at the agency's headquarters in Washington. While the Comeys drove back to their home, his lawyers negotiated the terms of an interview with the top lawyer for the Secret Service. When Mr. Comey arrived home, he was met by Secret Service personnel who drove him into Washington, where he was questioned. Didn't even get to unpack. Mr. Trump fired Mr. Comey in May of 2017 amid the FBI's investigation into whether Mr. Trump's advisors had colluded with the Russian government to help him win the 2016 presidential election. Since then, Trump has repeatedly called for his prosecution and called him a traitor and a leaker. Mr. Comey now appears to be under scrutiny for his handling of the inquiry into the 2016 presidential campaign. The administration is also examining the role, put it nicely, of John O. Brennan. That O is not part of his last name. It's his middle initial. You know that. Not O'Brennan. Anyway, he's, of course, the former CIA director, which is why you know what his name is. During his first term, Trump pressured the Justice Department to indict him. That is to say, Comey, although I would have pressured the Justice Department to indict Trump, and privately told one of his White House chiefs of staff that he wanted to, quote, get the IRS on Mr. Comey. Amid Trump's attempts to have Comey prosecuted, he has been investigated for leaking classified information, and a special counsel examined how he had handled the Russia and Clinton email investigations. Mr. Comey was later the subject of a highly unusual and invasive audit by that selfsame IRS. Imagine that. Legally, there are few limits on the power of federal agents to follow someone around in public. No court order is necessary because people are generally considered to have no expectation of privacy when they're in public. The agency investigated a couple of 46 posts during the Biden administration, but none drew the law enforcement response used in Mr. Comey's case, according to current and former Secret Service officials. Charlie Savage, by the way, did in fact help out on this. I thought he would have been the byliner on this one, but Charlie Savage, Devlin Barrett, and Maggie Haberman all contributed to this reporting. Not surprising, probably to be expected. Yeah, so interesting. I guess if I really had to spin this for the Trump guys, in terms of why would this extraordinary measure have been taken, right? They say, look, most rational people would be like, yeah, the threat, the quote-unquote supposed threat, the reported threat, which is in fact only a purported threat, came from the former director of the FBI. End of inquiry. We trust that when this guy says, yeah, I'm not planning on assassinating the president, and it's not happening today, he's not even in the same country as me, end of inquiry. But I guess you could spin it and say, well, normally, if it was just some random normie guy who said that, I would say, on the one hand, some people would say, well, we don't know anything about that guy. We really better investigate. We don't know whether he's nuts or not. We should look into it. On the other hand, they may say, we get normie, or not normie really, but rando threats all the time. And all we can do is, since we know nothing about the guy, is, keep an eye out as we usually do. Anybody approaching with a gun? No? Okay, good. You might say, well, somebody with top secret clearance, a former FBI director, he has the ability to talk people into letting him get a little closer than would normally be safe to the president because, by virtue of who he is. Although really, since he's obviously persona non grata in the Trump administration, it's very unlikely that they'd be able to convince Secret Service agents or FBI agents to let Comey any closer to Trump than any random person would be allowed. It doesn't move in Trump circles. It would be a better argument if it was somebody who had Trump's confidence that you should be doing this kind of monitoring. But I guess you could say, well, the former FBI directors may have ways, of insinuating himself into the vicinity where the president will be. Although not now, because he's in the Middle East. So, yeah, it's not a strong argument. It's just an argument. All right, let's see. Going back to the reading list that I have put away here, just trying to make some use of it. There's a couple of other weird things going on in that, in that space, I guess we could, from Public Notice, which is Aaron Rupar's operation. We always mention that, and then it always ends up that it was written by Liz Dye. And wow, look, Liz Dye wrote this one too, just yesterday. More garbage regarding the FBI. Chuck Grassley, I think is he 90 already? I think he's referred to, as a nonagenarian in this thing. Grassley launders new MAGA smear campaign against the FBI, but this time the smear is coming from inside the House. What does this mean? Liz Dye, tell us a little bit about what's going on. Ready? Chuck Grassley has put out a press release a week ago. Chris Wray's FBI wasn't looking out for the American people. It was looking to save its own image, Senate Judiciary Chair Chuck Grassley warbled in a press release last week. I didn't even think of him as a warbler, but there you have it. The nonagenarian, ding, from Iowa, no comment, is big mad about a supposed cover-up of a source. Ooh, cover-up of a source. What does this mean? Cover-up of a source who could prove President Trump's bogus theories about election fraud in 2020. But it's being suppressed, of course, by the FBI. But not just the FBI. Chris Wray at the FBI, who was appointed by Donald Trump. That, That seems like, well, yeah, a little bit nutty to be sure. But yeah, I appoint all the best people, but then they all try and investigate me too. All right, well, that seems like more of a you problem than a me problem, but tell me more. These records smack of political decision-making and prove that the Wray-led FBI was a deeply broken institution, he rambled. And again, appointed by President Trump, was that is the FBI directorship I would think, right, a Senate-confirmed position? Did Grassley vote for Wray? And if so, why? No one asks these questions. Anyway, new FBI Director Kash Patel, a former conspiracy theorist for hire, of course, was only too happy to pour gas on the fire. Former FBI leadership withheld the facts and misled the public on China's 2020 election interference. And they did it for political gain, he tweeted. Oh, no. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I thought I would really enunciate that in case you didn't know where you were. I don't think that's really applicable to a podcast or even to a live stream because you have to kind of go there intentionally. But I don't know. It's just sort of, it seems like a good way to ground yourself at the end of each break. So I continue to do it. I don't think I owe you an explanation on that one. But you got one anyway because we're all about explainers here on the show. All right, we were in the middle of, just by way of explaining what I'm supposed to be doing and why I'm going back to it, middle of reading this piece from, what's the name? And Public Notice, right. Liz Dye's piece for Public Notice on Chuck Grassley's attempt to raise a new smear of the FBI by smearing former FBI director appointed by Trump, Chris Wray, who also got fired and replaced with Kash Patel. Patel says former FBI leadership, i.e. Wray, withheld the facts and misled the public on China's 2020 election interference. I guess the new theory is, or I guess it's probably old by now, the reason that Donald Trump is said not to have won the 2020 election, which he totally did, of course, and why Biden was somehow ushered into power because, again, for the clarity of the people, there's no people reviewing, the algorithm reviewing things at YouTube, the answer to this stupid proposition is no. Joe Biden was the winner of the 2020 presidential election. But what's interesting is that YouTube is going to flag my podcast as spreading conspiratorial nonsense if I tell you that the current director of the FBI right now, the guy actually in charge of the FBI, Kash Patel, thinks that Trump won the 2020 election, not Joe Biden, and that it was from China's interference in that election. And yet they're going to flag me and say you can't put up your YouTube. I think they might let this one slide. I don't know, but we're gonna flag your YouTube post because you're telling me what the FBI, the current director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, thinks. Now we're not going to do anything about any Kash Patel videos, or we're not going to flag any of those, because if we did that, then there would be an FBI investigation of YouTube, and we don't want that. So instead, we'll flag you for telling us that someone else has been posting objectionable content. But if that someone else is the director of the FBI, go F yourself, I guess. Anyway, that's where we are. This is, again, Kash Patel's quote, "This FBI is exposing all of it and giving Americans the truth they deserve." All right. But as with so many conspiracies laundered through Grassley, this one falls apart the second you look at it. In August of 2020, the Albany field office of the FBI. There's always, where does this start snowballing, all this crap? And the answer is, in August of 2020, the Albany field office of the FBI, why not, received a tip from a single confidential source who claimed to have a sub-source in China, as Donald Trump wouldn't really pronounce it, but as we like to make fun of him for pronouncing it. Sure, why not? Could a person in Albany know a person in China? Absolutely. Is it extremely likely? There's a lot of people in both Albany and China. Sure, why not? We got to look into everything. That subsource, though, why are we talking to the subsource in China? Because that subsource had his own subsource inside the Chinese government, who claimed that China was sending fake driver's licenses to America so that sympathetic Chinese expats could get liquor, enter a bar, register to win? No. So that they could cast fraudulent votes for Joe Biden. That's it. That's how the Chinese would handle it. What we'll do is, we'll make fake licenses here in China and just mail them to the United States, to Chinese operatives living in the United States who would otherwise not be able to vote. But now that they have fake IDs, will be able to vote in numbers that will sway the election, says Chuck Grassley and Kash Patel, by the way. That's so dumb, I can't even believe it. But okay, so a guy in China says, I know a guy in the government who says they're totally doing this. I'll call my friend in Albany, New York, so that the message is sure to get to the proper authorities in the American government. The Albany office blasted out an intelligence information report, abbreviated here as IIR, so it's industry jargon, to every corner of the government, announcing that, quote, Chinese government production and export of fraudulent U.S. driver's licenses to Chinese sympathizers in the United States, Chinese themselves, I don't know, in order to create tens of thousands of fraudulent mail-in votes for U.S. presidential candidate Joe Biden. At which point, high-ranking officials in the FBI flipped out and forced the report to be recalled because, well, fill in the blank, I guess. That's the way it's put by Liz Dye in her write-up here. There's more to it. I'm not finished with this by a long shot. But just realize how kooky this whole thing is, right? We were just talking with Greg in the first part of the program about the emergency services dispatcher in Kerr County getting all sorts of calls. Hey, the water is rising. Hey, the water is rising. Hey, the water is up 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet. My house is being swept away. Please come help me. Well, she was okay with dispatching emergency services workers to do what they could about rescuing people from the flooding, but I'm not going to press the button because I need my supervisor to tell me whether or not I should press the button. Meanwhile, the Albany field office of the FBI sends out an all-points bulletin based on one guy who says he knows a guy in China who says he knows a guy in the Chinese government, that you got to be on the lookout because they're mailing IDs, fake IDs, to Chinese sympathizers in the United States. Why? So they can go to the polls and ask for a ballot, and when they say prove that you are a registered voter, you can show them the fake ID? No. So that they can vote by mail, which I guess means that they go to an office somewhere and say, I'm a registered voter, please send me a, I don't know. I'm not certain what, I don't know. There's no bamboo fiber in it. I don't understand it, right? Doesn't make any sense. Only the bamboo fiber conspiracy theory made sense to me. But okay, I guess they were going to use their fake IDs to get a hold of mail-in ballots and something. I guess that's why we're at the fill-in-the-blank stage of the game. The Trump administration would like us to believe that the report was spiked because it contradicted FBI Director Chris Wray's testimony to Congress on September 24th, 2020, that, quote, "We have not seen historically any kind of coordinated national voter fraud effort in a major election, whether it is by mail or otherwise." Well, I'll have you know that previous FBI leadership, that means Chris Wray, chose to play politics and withhold key information from the American people, exposing the weaponization of law enforcement for political purposes during the height of the 2020 election season. Patel and his assistant FBI director Dan Bongino blustered in a press release last month. So that's their interpretation of the Albany office sending out this bulletin and then the national office saying, "Holy cow, what the hell are you doing?" Not "you're fired," or "why didn't you call your supervisor," or something like that, but rather, hey, no, we don't endorse this report. Well, it's a huge cover-up, says the new leader of the FBI. Now, John Solomon, the disgraced former editor of The Hill, who set up shop as now Just the News, that's what they call his operation now, after his entanglement in Rudy Giuliani's efforts to smear Joe Biden with lies about Burisma was revealed. It's John Solomon, that self-same John Solomon, who has broken the story, so to speak, of this Chris Wray operation, apparently, writing last month that the IIR was recalled from intelligence agencies at about the time that then FBI Director Chris Wray testified that there were no known plots of foreign interference ahead of the 2020 election, and implied that the FBI failed to connect it to a story about fake IDs from China that had been seized at O'Hare Airport the month before. Now, once again, I thought the story was that they were mailing these fake IDs into the United States, but instead they were buying them airline tickets, I guess, putting the box on a plane and sending it to Chicago because reasons. I don't know. I guess it doesn't really say that they were mailed to operatives in the United States. It just says they were sent there, and apparently they were sent there via O'Hare Airport. That's the claim. They may or may not have ever found a shipment of fake IDs at O'Hare Airport. Don't know. But they also are, making the fantastical leap. Well, what are these fake IDs doing? And is there one? Is there two? Are there 1,000? Are there 10,000? We found them. So what does that mean? That likely means the plot has been foiled. But obviously this means that they were being sent to people in the United States for what reason? I was sent here to assassinate your premier. Well, that doesn't work in this case. So to impact the election, we were all going to use them to get mail-in ballots by the millions and swing the election. That was their belief. Here's more from, I guess, who are we reading here? John Solomon and his wackadoodle story. They also said the intelligence report was recalled within a few weeks and the allegations never fully investigated on the grounds that the source needed to be re-interviewed, he wrote conspiratorially. But in fact, another agency, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, had intercepted nearly 20,000, that's what they claim, 20,000 fake licenses around the time the intelligence came in a possible corroboration of the report, officials said. Fox News hyped it under the caption, FBI blocked probe into alleged Chinese 2020 election meddling to protect Wray from fallout, documents show. And the wingnut ecosystem was happy to take it from there. So again, I'm not sure how this whole operation is supposed to work, but they say 20,000 fake IDs. And, by the way, those are sold all the time to kids trying to get liquor versus, impacting the election. And also 20,000 votes, even, strategically placed. Well, Chicago is not the most strategic place for it. Those, by the way, I don't see any information on this, but it says they got 20,000 fake licenses. What state did they purport to be from? And would it make any difference if there were 20,000 votes one way or the other in that state? I'd just be curious about that. Like if they're all from California, no. All from New York, no. It wouldn't work that way. And what are the odds of 20,000 new Chinese American, licensing is being legitimately issued in Montana or Wyoming, for instance. I don't know, but it would be a brilliant plot if it were. Anyway, at this stage, we need to name names. Who shielded Chris Wray? Are they still on the job? Don't fire them. Suspend them without pay. Suspend clearances. Investigate immediately. Indict. Enough is enough. In all caps, enough is enough. Tweeted notorious international super spy Mike Flynn, of all people. Don't take your advice from him. Why don't fire them, though? I'm curious what the logic is there. But Patel, whose 2023 book, Government Gangsters, contained an enemies list that included Wray, did not seek an indictment for some strange reason. Instead, he turned the supposedly incriminating evidence over to Grassley, who's 90, and what the hell? Why wouldn't you give it to that guy? And a full 2 weeks later, after giving right-wing media a 2-week head start to spin the story, Grassley finally published it last week. Meanwhile, back in reality, the documents suggest a much more likely explanation for the withdrawal of the IRR. Well, it says IRR, but as we know, it's IIR. Why would the Albany office's bulletin, the report, be revoked, be rebuked, I don't know, what's the right word for it? Well, withdrawn, anyway. The answer, the confidential source was a kook. We're skeptical of this reporting based on the portions regarding COVID that veer into conspiracy theories, of all things. One September email read, adding, is this subsource in China the same one who said that the Chinese government had underground bases in Republican states to disperse coronavirus? Now, there's probably a lot of people in China who may or may not be the source here, but that's a good question. Why are they going to Albany? Did this happen before, and is this guy an idiot? We don't know. The source was a brand new confidential informant, as it turns out, who called in a complaint and subsequently verified his story by showing FBI agents the electronic business card of a person who, quote, does in fact live in, redacted, we don't know where, and have contacts overseas. He claimed that the Chinese government had produced a large amount of fraudulent United States driver's licenses that were secretly exported to the United States, except it wasn't a secret. They had been seized at O'Hare Airport. Probably a kook read that report and then had a fever dream and then called the FBI field office in Albany, because they probably live in, redacted, Albany probably, and just blurted out, I know a guy in China too. Anyway, he claimed that the Chinese government had fraudulently, produced a large amount of fraudulent U.S. driver's licenses, secretly exported to the United States, as reported in the newspapers, as all secrets are, to allow tens of thousands of Chinese students and immigrants sympathetic to the Chinese Communist Party, of course, as opposed to possibly Falun Gong, to vote for U.S. presidential candidate U.S. like United States person, Joe Biden. And weirdly, the quote is Joe, and then double parentheses Biden. So I guess that's maybe that's their way of highlighting the subject names there, Biden. I don't know what that is supposed to mean, but that's basically it. The report was a cocktail of various right-wing theories floating around in mid-2020, just 3 weeks after Trump sought to ban TikTok, remember that, as a vector for Chinese influence. The informant alleged that China had collected private U.S. user data from millions of TikTok accounts. That, too, was in the news. He ripped it from the headlines, we could say. To include name, ID, and address, which would allow the Chinese government to use real U.S. persons' information to create the fraudulent driver's licenses. As then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo lobbed baseless accusations at the RNC, the convention, about Beijing interfering to help Biden, the informant appeared with a story to confirm it. And while Trump was babbling that, quote, if foreign countries want to, this is an easy system to break into because they'll do counterfeit ballots. They'll do counterfeit ballots by the millions, the informant was claiming, at the same time that China planned to use the fraudulent driver's licenses to account for tens of thousands of mail-in votes. Except TikTok does not collect users' home addresses, much less their driver's license data. And the story about 19,888 counterfeit driver's licenses confiscated at O'Hare specified that the interceptions took place during the first 6 months of 2020, and Biden didn't secure the nomination until June. So the information from inside China saying, oh yeah, we're sending it here so that they can vote for Joe Biden. Why would that be the information if it could very well have been any one of the other candidates? But all right, whatever, sure. Also, CBP, Customs and Border Protection, noted that the IDs were mostly fakes for underage college students, most of whom did not appear to be Chinese. In other words, basically, some kids wanted fake IDs, so they probably went to an online service and probably paid for it in crypto, by the way, and ordered things from China. Send me a fake ID so that I can vote in China. But other than that, bang up job, Albany, says Liz Dye. The included photo is for a Michigan driver's license, which, at least there was a close election going on there. Anyway, what followed reads as a pissing match, she says, between FBI headquarters, who recognized that unvetted informant statements feeding into the exact conspiracy theories being pushed to discredit the upcoming election were likely to be seized upon by people who didn't care that report fell apart the second you looked at it, and the field office in Albany, who didn't want their shiny report tossed into the trash. But sorry, it sucked, and that's where it went. We know that the source is a first contact, which isn't usually all that helpful in terms of establishing their credibility, and hasn't been re-interviewed. Are you considering recalling the IIR until you can track the source down and re-interview? Someone from headquarters wrote on September 25th. Everything election is getting scrutiny, and we just want to be sure we have reliable sourcing. Like, that's actually good procedure. Something in the IIR process is definitely going well if we receive a call within a few hours from HQ about one of our IIRs. Nicely done, chirped one of the chiefs in Albany to their team, reporting the interest from higher-ups. They're in trouble. You can see that. By September 29th, officials in D.C. were in a panic that the informant's dubious and rather stupid story would become a political football, particularly since it contradicted Wray's testimony to Congress and the conclusion of the wider intelligence community that Trump's claims about Chinese election interference were nonsense. Based on the conflict of this information to that of the wider USIC, intelligence community, the fact that it contradicts Director Wray's testimony to Congress and the importance to the current administration, then Trump, I think we should be ready to back up the IIR with a minimum of the following information and treat it like it will be going in front of the president. We're skeptical of this reporting based on the portions regarding COVID that veer into conspiracy. I mean, that's at least a good excuse for not giving Trump the report that he would desperately want. Well, we doubt it not because of the awesome conspiracy theories, but rather because, it's got COVID disinformation in it, even though Trump loves COVID disinformation. When the agents from Albany then went back out to interview the informant, like they were supposed to do, he said that the messages confirming his story had been deleted by Telegram or from Telegram by the sender. So on re-interview, all right, can we see the messages you got from your friend in China? No, they were deleted. And so the IIR was withdrawn over the objections of officials in Albany, of course, who grumbled that pulling their work because of political considerations goes directly against our organization's mission to remain apolitical and simply state what we know. It's just that they no longer knew it. And no one thought about it until last month when the story was trotted out as proof that all the right-wing fairy tales about the deep state trying to doom Trump and suppress the truth about election fraud were actually true. Oh, I see. Well, This next section says, we've seen this movie before. This isn't the first time we've seen Trump's henchmen hit Control-F conspiracy theory and go trolling through the FBI files to back-formulate evidence. It isn't even the first time they grabbed up a confidential informant years later and handed him over to Grassley in particular to parade around Congress. But it should be noted that in those prior efforts, they imploded in spectacular fashion. In May of 2023, Republicans crowed that they'd found an informant who could confirm that the, quote, Biden crime family had taken millions of dollars in bribes from China. Grassley and House Oversight Chair James Comer issued a press release demanding the FBI produce an unclassified record alleging a criminal scheme involving then Vice President Joe Biden and a foreign national. Produce it. Not show it to me since you've got it, but go ahead and make it up. That's another way of interpreting it. After great hype, including intimations by Comer that the informant had been intimidated by the Biden administration and gone into hiding, it emerged that the star witness was Gal Luft, an Israeli-American on the run from an indictment for acting as an unregistered agent of the Chinese government and violating sanctions on Iran. There's a good Israeli guy violating the sanctions on Iran. Grassley immediately pivoted to claiming that the issue wasn't whether Luft's allegations were true, but rather whether the FBI pursued his obvious lies vigorously enough. Next, they hauled out Alexander Smirnov, an FBI informant who suddenly remembered in 2020 that he'd heard Ukrainian executives talking about bribing Joe and Hunter Biden 3 years earlier. For the better part of a year, I've been pushing the Justice Department and FBI to provide details on its handling of very significant allegations from a trusted FBI informant implicating then Vice President Biden in a criminal bribery scheme, Grassley and Comer vamped, releasing a cache of internal FBI documents supposedly documenting the FBI cover-up. But Smirnov's story was riddled with holes. It matched stories being pushed at the time by Rudy Giuliani and contradicted his own prior reports. He claimed to have traveled to Ukraine with a friend during a period when the friend never left the U.S., and he insisted that there was corroborating footage of Hunter Biden in a hotel in Kyiv, a city Hunter had never visited. In February of 2024, Smirnov was indicted for lying to the FBI, at which point Grassley pivoted again to claiming that the real scandal was the FBI cover-up. When presented with information from a source the agency so trusted, the FBI, as exposed by Senator Grassley, sat on the document for years without performing due diligence. What does that even mean? It's clear that only after Senator Grassley made the Smirnov interview documents public did the FBI investigate the allegations in that document, his comms team told the Iowa politics blog Bleeding Heartland. Grassley conspiracies are even doubling back onto each other now, as FBI whistleblower, quote-unquote, FBI whistleblower Stephen Friend appeared on Fox News last week to explain the Chinese election informant scandal to host Will Cain. In 2022, Grassley touted Friend's claims that the FBI was violating protocol to harass January 6th defendants. In fact, Friend was put on leave after refusing to arrest people who sacked the Capitol, including a member of the Three Percenters militia who stormed Congress sporting bear spray and a GoPro. There's still yet more. Let's see if we can finish this article up. Grassley and Patel's reboot is no summer blockbuster. In fact, it seems to have landed with a thud, thank God, and perhaps because the aging star keeps forgetting his lines. But even so, these games of distraction have real-world consequences. Former Deputy Assistant Directors Nikki Flores and Tanya Ugoretz, hoping I'm getting close to that name, two agents with decades of experience each, were both pushed out because they approved the recall of the IIR. Worse, Grassley and Patel failed to redact their names from the documents, all but ensuring that they'll face harassment or worse from Trump's deranged fans. Soon enough, Grassley will tweet that the real scandal is the FBI's failure to follow up on a rando informant's fever dream, and maybe the real friends we've made all along the way are the ever shorter news cycle as Grassley launders yet another lie and ruins some poor civil servant's life. All right, we made it to the end. It took us a while there, but important, I guess. Well, maybe to get it on the record, we probably shouldn't be doing any of Chuck Grassley's work for him and letting people know that he's even trying to start such a scandal and such a rumor. But eventually it'll break out into the wider news space, and probably the New York Times will write a terrible article about it with a very misleading headline. And now you'll know what that is about and where it's coming from. Chuck Grassley just won't quit, I guess, even at 90 years of age. Or maybe it's making it worse for him. Anyway, good point here at the end. These two FBI directors, or former deputy assistant directors, will now find themselves harassed and their families being harassed by weirdos from the Trump camp because they did the right thing and followed protocol and said, why don't we check out this source before we publish it nationwide? And that's their crime. Once again, not only are we investigating those who investigated Trump, but we are now investigating people who didn't investigate people Trump didn't like way back when. Fantastic. All right, time now to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, of course. And he's got a blockbuster of a show, I'm sure, planned for you. Tell you what, furious world leaders like Lula from Brazil, Modi of India, Zelensky of Ukraine, Foreign Minister of Mexico, and President Sheinbaum
Radio.com.
taking decisive action to checkmate Trump.
To Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
Well, I'd like to find out what that decisive action is, and love to see Trump checkmated after all. So let's see what's happening on the international scene. Lula, of course, has fresh reason to be annoyed with Donald Trump, as we discussed. We didn't even get around to reading his crazy-ass letter. I don't know if Justice has that on tap for you, but we'll see you again tomorrow.